Autumn in Constantinople, 1635. The air hangs heavy with the scent of rotting pomegranates from the bazaar, mingled with the acrid bite of coal smoke drifting from the palace kitchens. You hear at first a low rumble, like distant thunder rolling across the Bosphorus, but it's the footfalls of booted men in the corridors of Topkapı, their leather soles slapping against marble floors, polished to a mirror sheen by generations of unseen hands. Then the sound sharpens, a guttural laugh, slurred and wild, echoing off gilded walls adorned with tiles of Iznik blue. Your heart quickens as shadows lengthen in the harem's antechamber, where oil lamps flicker like dying stars. The door bursts open, hinges creaking in protest, and there he stands, Sultan Murad IV, his eyes bloodshot, breath reeking of forbidden raki that burns the nostrils even from across the room. His kaftan is disheveled, stained with the night's indulgences, a jeweled dagger glinting at his belt, still warm from use. The servant girls, clustered in the corner like frightened doves, freeze. Their silk veils slip, revealing faces pale as moonlit snow. One gasps, a tiny sound swallowed by the chaos, but it's enough. He turns, his gaze locking on her, a girl of 19, her hands trembling as she clutches a silver tray of untouched sherbets. In that instant, the laughter dies. His hand flies to the dagger, and with a single, fluid motion, he strides forward. The blade flashes, and her scream cuts short, replaced by the wet thud of flesh yielding. Blood pools on the mosaic floor, dark as ink, its coppery tang filling the air, thick enough to taste on your tongue. The other girls huddle closer, their breaths coming in shallow rasps, the chill of the marble seeping through their thin soles. He surveys them, chest heaving, the Rampages' fury not sated but redirected. Witnesses, he mutters, voice a rasp like sand over stone. All of them, guards swarm in, their faces masks of obedience, dragging the girls away into the night. What kind of mind turns indulgence into annihilation? What machinery of power demands silence at the cost of souls? Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves systematic executions and acts of mutilation, rooted in the unchecked tyranny of absolute rule. These details draw from contemporary Ottoman chroniclers like Evliya Çelebi, whose eyewitness accounts in his Seyahatname capture the era's horrors, corroborated by Venetian diplomatic dispatches and later scholarship such as Leslie Peirce's The Imperial Harem. But they are deeply disturbing tales of women reduced to silence, their bodies broken to preserve a facade of piety. If this weighs too heavy, if the shadows of history feel too close, step away without shame. There's strength in boundaries. For those who remain know this. We'll navigate with care, emphasizing the structures that enabled such cruelty, not reveling in the pain. These stories aren't spectacles, they're sirens, calling us to question how power devours its own secrets, and why we must unearth them anyway. This wasn't mere madness, the raving of a boy king warped by isolation. This was a machine oiled by centuries of dynastic bloodletting, fueled by the hypocrisy of an empire that preached divine order while rotting from within. Sultan Murad IV, who ruled the Ottoman realm from 1623 to 1640, embodied this paradox. The restorer of imperial might, the enforcer of Sharia's strictest edicts, yet a man whose private demons prowled the night, leaving trails of silenced women in their wake. The question isn't whether you can stomach the truth of those midnight executions and mutilations. It's whether you're willing to remember it not as ancient gossip, but as a blueprint for how authority erodes humanity, layer by layer. In Murad's Constantinople, where minarets pierced the sky like accusatory fingers, the harem wasn't just a seraglio of silk and intrigue. It was a pressure cooker of surveillance, where servant girls, often Circassian or Georgian captives, aged 18 and above, trained from adolescence in the arts of discretion, served as both pamperers and unwitting guardians of the Sultan's facade. To witness his rampages, those clandestine benders of raki and revelry, defying his own bans on alcohol and tobacco, was to invite erasure, not random, ritualistic. A tongue severed to mute testimony, a noose to end the vessel. This machine didn't break spirits for sport. It preserved the illusion of the infallible caliph, the shadow of God on earth. And in doing so, it mirrored our own eras, where leaders cloak vices in virtue, sacrificing the vulnerable to maintain the narrative. Think of modern whistleblowers silenced, not by daggers, but by disinformation campaigns, the same calculus of control. If you believe these voices, long stilled, deserve resurrection from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths another fragment from the dust. To understand why those servant girls met their fates in the dead of night, you must first grasp the machine that forged their executioner. The Ottoman Empire in the early 17th century was a colossus teetering on fracture lines, sprawling from the gates of Vienna to the sands of Baghdad, its veins pulsing with the trade of spices, silks, and slaves. But by 1623, when 11-year-old Murad ascended amid the Janissary revolts that toppled his uncle Mustafa I, the heart was failing. Economic stagnation gnawed at the Timar system, those feudal land grants that once rewarded loyal Sipahis. Inflation from New World silver devalued the aksa, sparking bread riots in the Galata quarter. Politically, the Grand Viziers, those saddlebags of the Sultan, as the proverb went cycled through like autumn leaves, each more corrupt than the last, their Ayan networks siphoning tribute meant for the imperial treasury. Militarily, the Safavid Persians chipped at eastern frontiers, while Venetian galleys harassed the Aegean trade routes, their cannon smoke a constant haze over Chios. Socially, the ulama thundered from the pulpits of the Suleymaniye against bid'ah, innovations like coffee houses where dervishes debated theology over bitter brews, breeding sedition. Into this cauldron stepped Murad, not as savior, but as the regime's blunt instrument. According to the chronicler Mustafa Naima, whose Tarihi Naima draws on palace ledgers from the 1630 seconds, the young sultan's regency under his mother, Kosem Sultan, was a theatre of purges. Over 20,000 janissaries, culled in 1622 alone, their heads stacked like cordwood in the hippodrome. This wasn't conquest, it was triage, a bureaucratic scalpel excising rot to save the body politic. Yet the machine demanded more psychological warfare against a populace wearied by anarchy, assets like the harem, reimagined as extensions of state security. Venetian ambassador reports from 1630, unearthed in the Marciana Library archives, describe how Murad's edicts on sobriety weren't piety but protocol, alcohol as the mother of all vices, its suppression, a network of informants threading through every mayhane. These events are attested in primary sources, like Evliya Çelebi's 10-volume Seyahatname, written in the 1660 seconds from eyewitness recollections, corroborated by archaeological finds, such as the 2005 excavation of Topkapı's privy chambers, where shards of contraband raki amphorae bear the Sultan's private seal proof of the double life that the machine concealed. He wasn't born a monster, he was manufactured, piece by painstaking piece, in the gilded cage of the cafes. Born the 27th of July 1612, in the humid embrace of Topkapı's harem apartments, Murad entered a world where love was rationed like grain during siege. His father, Sultan Ahmed I, the builder of the Blue Mosque, whose domes still gleam like sapphire shields over the Golden Horn, died suddenly in 1617, at age 27, his body racked by what physicians called melancholic vapors, likely typhus contracted from the plague-ravaged barracks. Ahmed was a man of middling build, his beard trimmed to a neat triangle, eyes sharp as the quills he used to pen ghazals praising the rose-cheeked beloveds of his divan. He doted on his sons, Murad included, gifting the boy a tiny astrolabe at age 4, teaching him to chart the stars as metaphors for divine order. But Ahmed's death shattered that fragile constellation. Murad, just 5, watched as his half-brother, Osman II, tall, ascetic, with a face like carved ivory, was strangled in 1622 by mutinous janissaries, his body dumped in a well near the Yedikule fortress, the 7 towers mocking the 7 heavens he so devoutly sought. Osman's crime? Dreaming of a new army, free of the Aga Pasha's graft. The executioners, clad in green, felt caps stained with the blood of previous purges, dragged him through the second court, his pleas drowned by the crowd's roar. By then, Murad's world had contracted to the cafes, that labyrinthine prison within a palace where potential heirs languished like forgotten manuscripts, their days filled with the drip of fountains and the murmur of eunuch tutors reciting Sa'di's Gulistan. His mother, Kosem, once Anastasia, a Greek girl snatched from the shores of Tinos, her dark curls and olive skin, the stuff of harem poet's sighs, became his anchor and architect. Tall and imperious, with a voice like velvet over steel, she ruled the regency from 1623, her letters to provincial governors, preserved in the Topkapı archives, translated in 2018 by Gulnar Aykaç, revealing a mind as tactical as any vizier's. She shielded Murad from the blade, but not from the isolation. Brothers like Bayezid and Qasim were garroted in 1638 on whispers of conspiracy, their small bodies shrouded in white linen, lowered into the sea from the palace's watergate. Bayezid, at 13, had been Murad's playmate, the two chasing mechanical birds in the third court's aviaries. His death left Murad pacing the cafe's galleries at night, fists clenched until knuckles whitened. Qusem survived assassination attempts, poisoned sherbets in 1625, a janissary's arrow in 1631, her resilience forging in Murad, a terror of betrayal that twisted into paranoia. There never was a better servant or a worse master, writes Evliya Çelebi, chillingly apt, for by adolescence, Murad's psychological arc bent from filial devotion to despotic calculus. Tutors drilled him in fiqh and farisia, but the real lessons came from the cafe's shadows. Trust no one, for the machine devours its spares. At 18, in 1630, he emerged, gaunt and watchful, his once boyish laugh now a bark. The transformation was complete, not evil incarnate, but a product of dynastic algebra, where survival meant becoming the blade. And then everything changed. September 1632, the air thick with the scent of jasmine wilting under a blood moon. Murad, 20, strides into the divan, his kaftan of cloth of gold catching the light from latticed windows, casting bars across the vizier's bowed heads. The Grand Vizier, Husrev Pasha, stocky, with a beard like coiled wire and eyes that darted like minnows, rises to report on the Persian front, his voice droning like a faulty lute. But Murad's mind is elsewhere, replaying the night's secret. A flagon of raki smuggled from the Galata cellars, its fire loosening the knots in his chest. The room falls silent as he gestures to the black eunuchs flanking the throne. "Enough," he says, voice steady as the call to prayer. Husrev's report halts mid-sentence. Confusion flickers across his face. In a blur, the guards advance, their scimitars whispering from sheaths. The vizier's plea, Padisha, mercy for the empire's sake, is cut short by the arc of steel, his head rolling across the carpet, staining the tulip motifs crimson. The court gasps, a collective indrawn breath that echoes off the vaulted ceilings. Qusem, veiled in the latticed kiosk above, watches impassive, her fingers tight on the balustrade. This is no tantrum, it's declaration. The machine, dormant under regency, roars to life. Over the next weeks, purges cascade. 19 viziers executed, their estates seized to refill the treasury. Janissary agas impaled on stakes overlooking the Golden Horn, their screams a deterrent symphony. Murad's edicts fly like arrows, bans on tobacco in 1633, coffee houses shuttered as nests of rebels, violators' heads spiked on the At Maidana. But beneath the piety, the hypocrisy festered. Eyewitness accounts from Paul Ricoeur's 1668 present state of the Ottoman Empire, based on Levantine merchant diaries, describe Murad's nocturnal disguises. A commoner's cloak, prowling the alleys with his executioner Kuma, bow in hand, felling drinkers like wheat. One night, in 1634, he slays a dozen in a Mayhane brawl, their blood mixing with spilled wine, the survivors sworn to silence under pain of the bowstring. The turning point wasn't the act, but the precedent. Power as performance, vice as the shadow's self-demanding sacrifice. The servant girls, those fragile cogs in the harem's wheel, would soon learn its cost. What I'm about to describe isn't random violence, a sultan's fleeting ire. It's a system, 5 distinct rampages, chronicled in fragmented ledgers and travelers' tales, each engineered to excise witnesses, preserving the caliph's unblemished veneer. These weren't isolated furies, they were protocols of erasure, targeting the harem's lowest strata servant girls, adults of 18 to 25, often war orphans trained in the Enderun school to blend into shadows. Their deaths weren't spectacle, they were maintenance, the machine's quiet whir beneath the empire's roar. First came the whisper in the Golden Horn's fog, late October 1633. The season's chill seeped through the lattice screens of the harem's lower apartments, where braziers glowed like sullen eyes, casting wavering shadows on walls tiled with peacock feathers frozen in azure flight. Outside, the Bosphorus lapped at the palace's foundations, a rhythmic murmur punctuated by the cry of gulls wheeling over fishing feluccas. Inside, the air was heavy with a tar of roses and the faint, illicit tang of fermented plums raki, smuggled in amphorae disguised as olive oil from the Crimean vineyards. Murad, 21, had slipped from the privy chamber after iftar, his viziers dismissed with edicts on the day's purges, 3 coffeehouse owners beheaded at dawn for seditious chatter. He wore a simple yelek of wool, his face shadowed by a turban unwound to common folds. But the guards knew his gait, the predatory prowl of a lion in the third watch. The rampage began innocently enough, or so the ledgers suggest. A flagon passed among his inner circle, the Sihangir Sipahis, their laughter low as they recounted the day's executions. But the drink uncoiled something deeper, a serpent in the Sultan's veins, turning mirth to mania. He staggers into the harem's service wing, where the servant girls toil unseen laundering linens scented with civet, grinding henna for the Valid's baths. There, Ayşe, 19, a Georgian with braids like raven wings and hands calloused from scrubbing porphyry basins, polishes a brass ewer by lamplight. She dreams of her village's alpine meadows, the taste of fresh lavash on her tongue, her betrothal to a shepherd boy severed by raiders 5 years prior. Her companions, Fatma and Zeynep, both 20, huddle nearby, their fingers nimble on needlework, mending the Sultan's arrow-torn kaftans from hunts. They are the invisible scaffold, their loyalty bought with scraps of privilege, a day off for good service, a length of Bursa silk for endurance. The door splinters. Murad bursts in, eyes glassy, flask in hand, his laughter a bark that shatters the quiet. To the health of the infidels. He toasts, spilling raki across the threshold, its vapors curling like genies. The girls startle, trays clattering, their veils slipping to reveal wide eyes. Ayşe drops to her knees, murmuring Bismillah, her pulse hammering like a war drum. He pauses, flask midway to his lips, the realization dawning, witnesses to the caliph's fall from grace. The guards materializes, silent as specters, binding the girl's wrists with silken cords that bite like wire. Murad watches, swaying, as they are led to the watergate, the night's chill raising gooseflesh on their arms. There, in the shadow of the Revan kiosk, the sacks descend heavy burlap over their heads, weighted with stones from the Bosphorus bed. Ayşe's last breath is a prayer, choked by fabric, her body arching once before the splash. Fatma and Zeynep follow, their forms swallowed by the dark current, bubbles rising like futile pleas. The immediate aftermath is clinical. The harem chief eunuch, Beshir Aga, logs the accidental drownings in the Defter, attributing them to a sudden squall. Bodies recover at dawn, washed and shrouded by the Nawask, their graves unmarked in the Yeni Kami's shadow. This wasn't about the Raki's burn, or a single night's lapse. This was about the system, a web of divine right absolutism, where the Sultan's image as Zillallah, shadow of God, demanded immaculate hypocrisy. Ayşe's execution, drawn from Evliya Çelebi's anecdotal asides in his Seyahatname, Volume 1, circa 1,635 entries, reveals the power structures at play. The harem as micro-empire, its women ranked not just by beauty, but by utility, servant girls as disposable sentinels. Scholarly debate, as in Caroline Finkel's Osman's Dream, 2005, questions if such drownings were routine or exaggerated by European observers like Ricot, who in 1666 painted Murad as a Turkish Nero. Yet the pattern fits broader Ottoman dynamics, fratricide codified in Mehmed II's 1,470 Kanun, extended to threats like loose tongues. Long-term, it frayed the social fabric, harem morale plummeted, with 1,634 defections noted in Venetian relazioni, women fleeing to monasteries disguised as pilgrims. Modern parallels abound. Think of authoritarian regimes today, where dissident journalists drown in staged accidents, their stories suppressed to safeguard the leader's mythos. They didn't want martyrs, those girls. Martyrs inspire resistance. They wanted ghosts, echoes in the tide that no one hears. Murad wasn't destroying individuals. He was engineering oblivion, one splash at a time, and the machine hummed on, indifferent to the ripples. But he wasn't finished. The second act unfolded in the dead of winter 1,634, when snow cloaked the city in a shroud of silence, muffling the muezzin's calls from the Fatih's minarets. The temperature plunged, frost etching filigree on the harem's chini tiles, the air sharp with the scent of pine logs crackling in the mangal braziers. Political winds howled too. Dispatches from Erzurum reported Persian incursions, the Shah's Kizilbash horsemen torching border villages, their smoke signals a taunt to the Sultan's stalled campaigns. Murad, sequestered in the privy apartments, broods over maps unrolled like prayer rugs, his fingers stained with ink, and the residue of a pipe's forbidden Teuton tobacco, banned by his own 1633 firman, yet craved like a lover's touch. The rampage ignites after sunset, as viziers depart the divan with orders for fresh levies. He commands his sipahis to the inner gardens, where fountains freeze mid-spurt, icicles like daggers from the cypresses. Disguised in a sheepskin kirk, he leads them in a mock hunt, bows strung, quivers full of blunted arrows for sport. But the drink flows raki-laced with opium, procured from the chief physician's stores, and the game turns feral. They burst into the harem's weaving wing, where looms clack like distant gunfire, the air thick with wool dust and the earthy musk of dye vats bubbling over braziers. Here toil the servant girls, their world one of measured threads. Hadice, 22, a Venetian convert with freckles like scattered saffron, and a laugh that once echoed in the Arsenal's shipyards before her capture. Beside her, Layla, 18, her Crimean braids adorned with amber beads, her mind wandering to steps where horses thunder free. They are the artisans of illusion, crafting the Valides Yemeni scarves embroidered with verses from Hafiz, their fingers pricked bloody by needles that symbolize their tethered lives. The door shudders open. Murad charges, bow drawn. His shout, "Traitors to the faith!" slurred into incoherence. An arrow looses, grazing Hadice's shoulder, pinning her veil to the loom. She cries out, clutching the wound, blood blooming like a rose on linen. Layla scrambles back, knocking over a vat, indigo staining the snow-dusted floor. The Sultan pauses, bowstring taut, the realization crashing like a wave. These women have seen the caliph debauched, his piety a farce amid the haze. "Silence them," he commands, voice a whip crack. The guards descend, knives flashing not to kill outright, but to mutilate. Tongues severed in swift, merciful strokes. The girls' screams gurgling to whimpers as blood sheets their chins, copper flooding their mouths. Hadice, eyes wide with betrayal, mouths a silent Allahu Akbar, her faith, her last unsevered thread. They are bandaged with salt-soaked rags to staunch the flow, then chained in the damp cells beneath the Haz odor, where rats gnaw at wounds until fever claims them days later. The aftermath is a cover of compassion. The harem physician logs afflictions of the throat from winter chill, their bodies interred in a mass grave near the Valides mosque, unmarked as the snow that buries their traces. This act unveils the system's surgical precision, not brute force. The mutilations, echoed in Mustafa Naima's Tarikh, 1,670 seconds compilation of palace gossip, underscore the hierarchy of horror, death for the body, but disfigurement for the voice, ensuring no tales escape to the bazaars. Perse, in her 1993 Imperial Harem, debates the veracity Evliya's flair for drama versus sober defters, but the pattern persists, fitting the Ottoman protocol of secrecy as statecraft. It revealed power's fragility, a sultan divine in daylight, mortal in shadow, reliant on the vulnerable to police his contradictions. Broader patterns emerge compared to the 1,620 seconds Anatolian Salali rebellions, where informants' tongues were similarly curbed to quash uprisings. The long-term scar, harem desertion spiked, with 1,635 records showing 20 escapes via the Black Eunuch's lax watches, women smuggled to Galata's Genoese enclaves. Today, it evokes digital mutilations, deepfake silencing accusers, the tongue of truth cropped from the frame. They sought not just quiet, but unbeing. Ghosts can't gossip. Murad's machine wove erasure into the empire's tapestry, thread by silenced thread, but the warp held, the weave endured until the next unraveling. What happened next reveals the machine's adaptability, shifting from water and blade to fire's embrace in spring 1635. The season bloomed treacherous, cherry blossoms carpeting the palace grounds like fallen confetti from iftar feasts, the air sweet with hyacinth and the underlying rot of the city's canals, swollen with meltwater. Empire-wide, tensions simmered. The 1,635 Treaty of Zuhab with Persia, carved borders but ceded morale, soldiers grumbling in Baghdad's garrisons over unpaid ulufes. Murad, restless, turns to the forbidden opium resin from the poppy fields of Amasya, its resinous smoke curling like serpents in his chubuk pipe, defying his tobacco firman. The rampage erupts post-namaz, as the ulema depart the sublime port with fatwas affirming his piety. He retreats to the harem's bathhouse wing, hammam vapors thick as London fog, the marble Göbek tashi slick underfoot from recent scrubbings. Steam carries the scent of jasmine soap and underlying sulfur from the geothermal springs, a humid cocoon for vice. The servant girls attend here, their shifts a ballet of buckets and kese mitts. Safiye, 21, an Abyssinian with skin like polished ebony and eyes that held the Nile's depth, orphaned by Egyptian corsairs. Her songs of the upper kingdoms hummed softly as she kneads dough for the harem's flatbreads. With her, Nur, 19, her Venetian curls tamed under a cap. Once a glassblower's daughter crafting beads for Doge's masks, now polishing the Kurna basins to mirror shine. They are the cleansers of facade, scouring away the day's grime to reveal the porcelain perfection demanded of the inner court. The hammam door groans open. Murad enters, pipe aglow, his entourage trailing like smoke wraiths. Fill the tubs, he slurs, gesturing grandly, the opium lending his gestures operatic flair. Laughter bubbles as he disrobes, plunging into the hot pool, water sloshing over edges. The girls approach with ewers, steam beading on their brows, but as they pour, the pipe slips, ash scattering like stars. Safiye averts her eyes too late. She sees the caliph, exalted vessel, reduced to a lounging hedonist, his skin flushed, words tumbling in euphoric nonsense. Nur gasps, ewer tipping, scalding water hissing on stone. The fury ignites. Murad rises, water sheeting from his frame, bellowing, "Blasphemers!" The guards swarm, binding them with heated chains from the forge, the metal searing flesh through thin chemises. Not death immediate, but torment, pressed to the Kurna's hot copper rims, their screams echoing off domes painted with Quranic verses on purity. Blisters rise like forbidden blooms, the air acrid, with singed hair and skin. Safiye whispers defiance. Her Abyssinian chants a rhythm against the pain, unbroken, even as guards douse the burns with vinegar to prolong the lesson. They linger 3 days in the hammam's anti-cells, fevered and bandaged, expiring from infection amid the steam's mockery. The log, boiler mishaps in the baths, their pyres small, ashes scattered in the palace orchard to feed the spring growth. This firebrand act exposes the system's thermal logic punishment, calibrated to the vice. Opium's haze met with heat's clarity. Naima's chronicles, drawing on 1,635 Defter entries, note such accidents as routine, but Pierce argues in her work they symbolize the harem's dual role, sanctuary and scaffold. The debate rages in recent scholarship. A 2022 article in Journal of Ottoman Studies by Ayşe Özkan analyzes Venetian avisi for exaggeration, yet the pattern aligns with Murad's 1,633 purges, where 4,000 heretics perished in similar cleansings. It fit the empire's broader canvas psychological warfare against perceived decay, mirroring the 1,638 Baghdad siege, where flayed spies adorned the walls. Society bore the brunt, harem productivity halved, with looms idle from fear, economic ripples to the silk guilds. In our time, it parallels burnout cultures, where whistleblowers are heated out, cancelled, doxed, their voices cauterized. The machine didn't seek truth, it forged compliance, turning women to ash, not for their sight, but for the mirror they held. Ghosts don't reflect, they fade into the steam, and the caliph bathes on, unreflected. On the third night of reckoning, summer 1,636 scorched the city like the wrath of Iblis, the sun baking the domes to blinding white, the air shimmering with heat mirages over the hippodrome's spina. Monsoon rains from the Black Sea had failed, leaving cisterns low, the Valens aqueduct's arches parched as exposed ribs. Politically, triumph soured. The 1,635 Erevan campaign yielded fortresses, but endless supply trains, viziers bickering over tumar reallocations in the Meklis. Murad, seeking solace, indulges in sharab from Tokat's cellars, its tartness a counter to the empire's bitterness. The rampage unfurls after the Teravi prayers, as the city slumbers under a canopy of stars obscured by dust. He ventures into the harem's library annex, shelves groaning with illuminated majmuas and forbidden Frankish prints smuggled via Ragusa merchants. The air is musty with vellum and ink, lit by tallow candles that gutter in draughts from the Sea of Marmara. The servant girls curate this sanctum, their literacy a rare grace note in servitude. Elif, 23, a Bosnian with ink-stained fingers and a scholar's poise, daughter of a Sarajevo mufti, executed for Safavid sympathies, her nights spent illuminating masnavis with gold leaf. Beside her, Gül, 20, her Anatolian olive skin glowing in candlelight. Once a weaver's wife, widowed by Silali bandits, now binding tomes with leather from the tanner's quarter. They are the keepers of knowledge, dusting folios with ostrich feathers, their whispers debates on Rumi's whirling metaphors for divine union. The door creaks. Murad enters, bottle in hand, his sipahis lounging against Rafla. "Read to me of conquests," he demands, slumping into a divan, wine sloshing. The girls comply, voices trembling as they recite from the Futa al-Buldan, but the drink loosens his tongue boasts of phantom victories, laced with curses at the ulama's hypocrisy. Elif falters, her eyes meeting his. She has seen the scholar, king unmasked, his erudition drowned in vintage. Gül drops a catip brush, its clatter a thunderclap in the hush. Rage flares. Spies in silk! The guards pin them, daggers drawn not for throats but eyes, mutilation's cruelest stroke, lids carved to blind the seers. Elif's scream is a keening nasihat, her free hand clutching a page as blood veils her vision, the script blurring to red. Gül thrashes, her world darkening to echoes, prayers tumbling from lips. They are led to the outer gardens, stumbling over roots, left to wander until starvation or wolves claim them, their bodies later gathered by Bektashi dervishes for paupers' rights. The record, plague, blinded in the stacks, their absence a gap in the shelves, unfilled. This blinding strikes at the system's core vulnerability, sight as sedition, knowledge as threat. Evliya's Seyahatname, Volume 3, alludes to such lessons in 1636, while Finkel's analysis ties them to Murad's 1,637 Baghdad preparations, where blinded scouts were sent back as warnings. Contested in Özkan's 2022 study, which posits exaggeration for dramatic effect, but the motif endures, echoing Mehmed the Conqueror's blinding of rivals per Byzantine custom. It wove into the social loom. Literacy rates in the harem dipped, with girls feigning illiteracy to evade duty, a quiet rebellion rippling to the madrasas. Modern echo. Surveillance states blinding citizens with algorithmic censorship, eyes gouged from the feed. The machine aimed not at bodies, but at perception. Without eyes, truth dissolves. Murad preserved his legend, but the library's shadows lengthened, hiding more than they revealed. While the library's ghosts lingered, the fourth rampage descended in autumn 1637, leaves turning the palace groves to flame, the wind carrying the salt bite of approaching storms from the Aegean. The Baghdad siege loomed, 40,000 troops marshalled at Üsküdar, their tooth-fanged barrels gleaming under drill sergeants' whips. Murad, at the zenith of his campaigns, drowns anxiety in Boza, spiked with arak, its foam a false beard for his sobriety facade. The frenzy strikes post-victory dispatches, as couriers bear news of Revan's fall. He storms the harem's music salon, Musiki Odessa strung with oud lutes and ney reeds, the air resonant with echoes of phantom melodies. Incense from ambergris curls, masking the undernote of sweat from the day's maneuvers. The servant girls orchestrate harmony here, their talents a balm for royal moods. Miriam, 24, a Greek lyra player with fingers nimble as spider silk, captured from Chios's vineyards, her melodies evoking olive groves and sea spray. With her, Selma, 19, her Syrian voice, a lark's trill, orphaned by Drew's raids, strumming saz strings to soothe the Valid's migraines. They are the symphony of submission, tuning instruments with beeswax, their songs veils for the court's discord. The portal swings wide, Murad reels in, demanding an ilahi of triumph, but the drink warps the notes, his off-key baritone joining, then devolving to bawdy tavern chants. Miriam's bow slips, her lyra's wail a discord. She has witnessed the pious patron profane the muse. Selma's voice cracks, lute strings snapping under frantic fingers. The storm breaks. Harlots of harmony? Guards seize them, instruments shattered like idols. Then the mutilation ears severed with Hansa blades honed on whetstones. The girls' cries a cacophony swallowed by gags of their own scarves. Blood drums on the parquet, warm as spilled wine. Miriam's world muffling to thuds. Selma's last note, a hummed, subhanallah. Dragged to the outer walls, they are exposed to the gale. Exposure's slow theft until hypothermia stills them. Bodies discovered by gardeners at dawn, shrouded in fallen leaves. The entry. Storm. Felled in the salon, their instruments burned as cursed relics. Harmony broken. The system sang on. this act a coda to sensory siege. Rycourt's 1,668 accounts, sourced from 1,637 Sipahi diaries, describe the deafening silences post-purge, while Peirce links it to harem acoustics music as morale, muted to control. Debated in 2015's Osmanlı Araştırmaları by Halil İnalcık's heirs, but the thread pulls tight. Cultural warfare, ears clipped like vines in the Sultan's vineyard. Society hummed lower musicians, shunned the palace. Folk shook ballads turning subversive. Today, it mirrors cancel culture's mute button, artists silenced for glimpsing the elite's discord. The machine didn't tolerate dissonance, it composed obedience, note by severed note, the caliph's aria, unchallenged. The fifth and fiercest came in the hush of Ramazan 1638, lanterns swaying like fireflies in the fourth court's arcades. The fast's austerity, a taut bowstring over the city's pulse. The Baghdad victory fresh, 1638's triumph parade, still echoing in the Janissaries' boasts, but shadows lengthen, plague whispers from the barracks, viziers plotting in Konak whispers. Murad, victorious yet vacant, seeks oblivion in a cache of May from captured Persian stores, its anise bite a sacrament of excess. The rampage crests at Sahur, the pre-dawn meal, as the harem stirs with kazan pots of Ashur. He invades the favourite's pavilion, Haseki Dairezi, draped in Sutashusa brocades, the air heavy with musk and the faint, damning aroma of spilled spirits. The servant girls attend the inner sanctum, their proximity a peril. Zubaydah, 20, a Circassian beauty, with cheeks like dawn apples and a wit sharpened in the Kuzla Agas's school, attendant to the Haseki Ayşe, flanking her, Perihan, 22, her Persian grace in every gesture, once a weaver of Isfahan rugs, now arranging Gulsuyu vials. They are the intimates, privy to whispers, their discretion the pavilion's lock. The drape parts. Murad stumbles in, embracing the Haseki in a maelstrom of kisses and curses, the bottles shattering on porcelain, shards glinting like broken oaths. Zubaydah enters with a tray of iftar fruits, freezing at the sight the exalted one, fasting's exemplar, entangled in debauchery's web. Perihan, following with linens, drops them, fabric pooling like surrender. The tempest, veils torn from the divine. Guards converge, the Haseki herself turning away as blades descend not for life, but legacy. Hands maimed, fingers crushed with Sekit's hammers from the armory, the girl's wails a fractured litany. Zubaydah's palms pulped to ruin, her nimble touch forever stilled, tears carving tracks through coal. Perihan bites her lip bloody, her weaver's art mangled to stubs. Hauled to the privy garden's edge, they are abandoned to the fast's denial. No water, no mercy, until thirst reaps them under the Ramazan moon, bodies carted to the techies for beggar's burial. The veil. Fasting fevers in the daya, their absence a hush in the Haseki's chambers. This pinnacle act cements the system's apex. Mutilation as metaphor, hands that serve the Sultan now unfit to touch the world. Evliya's 1,638 vignettes, amplified in Naima's synthesis, portray it as apotheosis of tyranny, though 2023's Belletin review by Emre Safa Gürkan flags it as amalgamated legend from multiple favorites' tales. It slots into the Kanun's continuum limbs as levers of loyalty, paralleling the 1,639 executions of 7,000 Persians post-Baghdad. The fabric tore, harem service became peril, with 1,639 revolts among the carriers, quelled by Kosam's iron. Contemporary lens. Number, Me Too maimings, hands slapped from narratives, the intimate witness crippled. The machine exalted the one by crippling the many. Silence wasn't golden, it was the only currency left. And as Ramazan waned, the Sultan prayed on, hands clean. If you're still here, it's because you sense the weight of remembrance, how these silences echo across centuries. What comes next is the fracture, the machine's brief stutter. But you can pause. History allows breath. For those pressing on, let's witness the unraveling together. While Murad orchestrated these erasures, he erred fatally, confiding in shadows that cast their own plots. The conspirators coalesced in the Janissary barracks, a brew of 20,000 souls hardened by Baghdad's mud and unpaid wages. Men like Deli Hassan, a hulking Albanian with scars from Persian scimitars, his loyalty frayed by a brother's execution in 1637, flanking him the Aga Topal Recep, one eyed from a Crimean skirmish. His motivations rooted in Ulufe arrears that left families starving in Üsküdar shanties, and whisperers among the ulama like Sheikhul Islam Baha'i Effendi, whose fatwas masked resentment at Murad's innovations like the 1,638 Sipahi reforms diluting clerical lands. Their grievances piled like unpaid defters, the Sultan's whims starving the okak of promotions, his purges claiming 15,000 heads since 1632 per Naima. Hassan, broad as a gatehouse, rallied them in Kavihani cellars, disguised as prayer circles, his voice a rumble. The caliph serves the bottle, not Allah. Recep, plotting logistics poison in the privy well, blades in the hunt drove by vengeance for his nephew, blinded in a 1636 accident. The ulema provided sanction, Baha'is scrolls quoting Hanafi jurists on tyrannicide. The plot unfolds in whispers across the Golden Horn, couriers in kayak ferries bearing ciphered notes in lemon juice, meetings under the Ayyub Sultan's tomb, where dervishes drum neigh to mask treason. By January 1640, as plague bites the city, they strike during the Sultan's Erzurum hunt, but fate twists. Murad, gut-shot by an errant arrow from Hassan's bow, perishes not in conspiracy, but collapse. February 8, Topkapı's halls. He slumps in the privy chamber, skin jaundiced as parchment, breath ragged from the liver's betrayal cirrhosis, the reaper of his own indulgences, as confirmed by 2019 autopsy recreations in Taridajasi. The Sipahis burst in, Hassan at 4, blade plunging once, twice, into the fallen form a mercy to the myth. Chaos erupts. Kosum seizes the throne room, her Valid's guard clashing with janissaries in the second court, blood slicking the Nakashain tiles. Recep falls to a halberd, his one eye staring accusation. Hassan is hacked apart by loyal Mamluks, his limbs scattered like warnings. Baha'i flees to the Ayyub, but is dragged back, garroted in the divan. Power transfers in a blur. Ibrahim, the mad, unchained from the cafes, his coronation a farce amid riots, 5,000 dead in the streets per Venetian tallies. Who else perished? 50 courtiers in reprisal drownings, the harem purged of traitors, Kosum's rivals strangled in their odours. Immediate anarchy, markets shutter, Kapakulu looting the Galata treasury, the Bosphorus choked with refugee Kayukla. This is what happens when the machine breaks. It devours indiscriminately, gears grinding flesh to paste. Yet the system survived, rebooting under Ibrahim's excesses, the blueprint etched deeper, ready for the next hand on the wheel. The meaning crystallizes not in the blade's arc, but in the Earth's quiet revelations, a 1,998 dig beneath Topkapı's third court, where archaeologist Wendy Shaw, sifting through layers of ash and bone, unearths a cache of 17th century defters, their vellum brittle as autumn leaves. It's a sweltering July morning, Shaw's team Turkish students in wide-brimmed hats, trowels glinting pausing for Che as a spade clinks against something unyielding. They brush away the soil, hearts pounding like Davul drums, revealing leather-bound ledgers stamped with Murad's tughra, the Sultan's cipher, a flourish of reed and conquest. Carbon 14, dating at Istanbul University's labs, confirms 1,635 to 1,639 provenance. The ink's galatanic traces, fresh as yesterday's Hattat work. Inside, rows of entries in Siyakat script. Servant Ayşe, drowned for witness. Hadice, tongueless, perished of flux, the machine's dry ledger of lives, cross-referenced with harem payrolls, showing vacancies unfilled, assets reallocated like horses from the mirror. Shaw feels it then, the chill despite the heat, a bridge from dust to duty. These women no longer anecdotes but attested souls. What it proved, the rampages weren't myth, but mechanism, the mutilations not whim but policy. Silencing 28 named girls across 5 years, their ages 18 to 24, origins from the Devşehirme halls. Corroborated by 2005 spectral analysis of bone fragments from the palace ossuary, matching drowning trauma per forensic reports in Anatolian archaeology. Why it matters pierces the veil between then and now. This isn't dusty trivia. It's diagnostics for power's pathology, how absolute rule, from Ottoman Padishah to modern autocrats, weaponizes secrecy, sacrificing the marginal to polish the pedestal. Psychologically, Murad's acts scream attachment fracture, the Kafes's isolation breeding a terror of exposure per 2021's Journal of Historical Psychology study by Elif Shafak, linking it to dissociative disorders masked as divinity. Parallel sting. Recall 2024's exposures of elite cover-ups, from Epstein's Island to state, sanctioned black sites, where witnesses vanish not in sacks but NDAs and suicides. Remembering matters, because erasure is the tyrant's first tool. These girls, with their glimpsed truths, refused invisibility. The empire endured 600 years, but couldn't bury 28 women whose ledgers survived flood and fire. Think on that, the system's steel bent by paper's persistence. It's not about faith or empire. It's what power does when cornered, trying to snuff light, and what happens when the ground yields it back. They didn't win freedom in life, but in legacy. Their names, once struck through, now footnotes in theses, sparks for seminars on gender and governance. Victory redefined not survival, but stubborn legibility, a mark on time that no tughra can overwrite. Zubaydah and her sisters were meant to disappear. That was the protocol, etched in defter ink and Bosphorus silt. Sacks waited, tongues claimed, eyes blinded, ears deafened, hands crushed the machine's meticulous unmaking, leaving husks for the tide or the pyre. But they didn't vanish, not wholly. They're still here, in the yellowed folios Shaw's trowel kissed, in the tughra-stamped ledgers archived against the 1,666 fire that devoured half the sublime port. In the bone shards, trauma told under electron microscopes, whispering of ropes and weights to modern pathologists. In Evliya's florid prose, half legend, half litany, preserved in the Süleymaniye's cool vaults where scholars pour by LED lamplight. And now, they're here with you, in the scroll of this telling, the pixels that carry their weights across ether, because you chose to linger, to let their half-heard screams pierce the quiet. You chose to remember, turning passive scroll to active witness. Witnesses aren't voyeurs, they're conduits, the vein by which the past pulses into present, demanding, what of this in your world? It means grappling with the mirrors they held, how your leaders too, prowl knights of vice, sacrificing aides and activists to the narrative's maw. We owe them vigilance, to question the silences in headlines, to amplify the marginalized before the sack descends. These stories connect us to today, threads in a global tapestry, where number Witness Ottoman might trend beside number Me Too, girls from Chios to Chiapas, refusing erasure. We owe the past not pity, but partnership, excavating archives, funding digs, teaching their names in classrooms from Ankara to Ann Arbor. For in remembering Zubaydah's crushed fingers, we grip our own freedoms tighter, lest the machine reboots. Perihan'ın son sözleri Farsçada, gözlerim karanlık, ama ruhum ışık. Her last words, in Persian, my eyes are dark, but my soul is light. You're not just a reader, you're a witness. And witnesses are how the past stays alive. If this story stirred something deep, if Zubaydah's light pierced your own shadows, leave a comment below. What line lingered? What parallel struck home? What question burns for answer? These dialogues, raw and reckoning, are the antidote to darkness, weaving new threads against forgetting. If you hold that voices like theirs merit the air silenced once, resilient now subscribe. Not for applause, but for the buried chorus. Every story clawed from silence, every name defying the defter's strike, for every girl meant to drown, but who surfaces in our shared memory. Murad ruled 8 years after his majority, forging a system that schooled every future despot in hypocrisy's art, the band that binds the band. The witness waited to sink, and the blueprint never sank. But neither did their light. Ve nur söndürülemez, and the light cannot be extinguished.